All right, fellas, thanks for being here today for this great conversation with my friend and front row dad, brother, Mike Ayala. We're talking about a lot of stuff, including growing up with wealth, entitled versus easy kids, and why you might not want your kids to get a job until they're 18. At least that's Mike's philosophy, and he'll explain why. Now, if you don't know who Mike is officially, he is an investor, speaker, podcaster, and founder of Investing for Freedom. He's also the co-founder of Four Peaks Capital Partners. He's got over 22 years of experience now in finding freedom himself by building teams and streamlining operations. One of the reasons I wanted to chat with him today is this fits into our business evolution pillar within Front Row Dads. And also intentional parenting, because I think he's one of the best dads out there. By age 24, Mike founded his first construction company that scaled to more than 100 employees, which he sold for a $12 million valuation, making it onto the Inc. 2009 2,500 fastest growing companies in America list. Now, I've had the privilege of spending some time with Mike, and I've watched him engage with his wife. I've watched him engage with his children. I've spent time with his kids when Mike's not around. And I just think Mike is an impressive person. I think you're going to enjoy this very real conversation today. And also, guys, this is just part one of a two-part conversation. So you should definitely come back and check out the second part, where we're going to be talking about building teams and buying freedom. And this conversation is a little more focused around his philosophies as a dad. Also want to let you know, guys, as this is just being released, we have a workshop that we're going to be releasing. If you've thought about becoming part of the Front Row Dad community and you want to see what it's all about, go to frontrowdads.com and check out the information about the workshop that we're going to be releasing, so you can get a sampling of what it's like to be part of this brotherhood. And also, guys, if you're enjoying the show, hey, it always means the world to us when you leave a review. So if you go to frontrowdads.com/review, you can tell us how we're doing. All right, let's jump into this chat with my friend and front row dad, Mike Ayala. Mike, what is in focus for you right now, man? Like, I'm talking last 30, 60, 90 days. What do you care about? What is in your heart? What are you thinking about? What are the challenges? What are you pumped about? Give us an overview, man. Take us into your world.
You know, I've been really struggling with, even looking at my calendar, I have a commitment problem right now because my kids are 21, almost 22, 19, almost 20, and then 18. And like, when I look at my calendar, I don't want to commit to anything because I don't want to travel. I just want to make sure that every moment that I can possibly get with them, I have. So I'm just going through this crazy transition right now as a parent and a dad, and which, I've mentioned this before, but that's the whole reason I'm in Front Row Dads, is just like kind of navigating that transition. So,
yeah, I know enough about your story to know that you're not feeling that way because you weren't there as a dad when they were younger. Like, you were present. That was a priority for you. You showed up a lot. And by the way, I met some of your kids, maybe not all your kids, but it shows, man. I've told you that before. I love your children. And so this moment that you're in right now is that you've got kids who are busy people and you're trying to capture as much time on the calendar with them as possible.
Yeah.
Are they home? Are they around here now? Are they all?
Yeah, we're in this little season. Tim just moved back from North Hollywood.
Yeah.
I subtly talked him into coming and interning with my team for 6 months.
Nice.
So, I'm in that phase where I'm trying to like not control their life, but also give them opportunities that are near me. So yes, they're all here. My youngest lives with us. My middle son lives with us again. And he's convinced he's moving to Flagstaff, so that I'll just love that while it happens. And then Dylan's on his own. He's got his own apartment. So, I was going to say something real quick on what you were saying too. And I think it's just being cognizant around seasons. I've often said when I sold my business in 2014, it was the best and worst day of my life because my entire identity was wrapped up in some person that I had sold. Because I was that company that, everything that we had built, everything that we had done, and it was kind of gone. But then like the real transition challenge that I had with this whole season, and I think it's important for me looking forward and realizing, like, being cognizant of the seasons that are in front of us. When probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was probably 2 years ago, when I started thinking about the fact that I literally was having a conversation with Mike McCarthy, and I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm not a dad anymore. Like, my kids are, I'm not a father. And he corrected me and he said, you're probably entering the season where they might need you more than they've ever needed you. They need a friend and they need a mentor. They don't just need the disciplinarian. They don't just need the dad. Like, they need you more than ever. You're going to become a mentor to them. And then that's how I got introduced to Front Row Dads too. But I think just being cognizant of those seasons, my identity, to your point, I built a life where I could be present for my kids. I didn't miss games. We traveled with them. They've seen the world. But my entire like identity was built up in that version of me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And redefining who you are, the new identity, the new chapter, it's all there, and I'm inspired, Mike, that you're taking that on and reconsidering, redefining. That's what Front Row Dads has done and what fatherhood means. A lot of people think it's over and done and hey, but a version of it for sure. Yeah. A version of that. Did you know that my dad just joined Front Row Dads?
No, I didn't know that. That's
awesome. Man. People have been listening to the show. They might have heard me mention that. But yeah, he's 77 years old, sent me a message and he's like, I want to be a better dad and grandfather. And like, who better to connect with and learn from than my son, And so, dude, 77 years old, like a guy who, by the way, is still doing martial arts, like got his black belt not so long ago. Here's a guy who he's ready, wants to grow. How amazing is that? Right? Yeah. It's a different season of life.
It's so awesome. I love it.
Season of life.
And I love that he's taking, he's wanting to grow too, but I went to jujitsu this morning for the first time in my life because my kids are like, let's do jujitsu. And I'm like, okay. Like I've been thinking about it forever, but really, I think as fathers, like we're constantly trying to think about challenging our children.
Yeah.
But when they start challenging us, like I'm it's just flipping the narrative, right? Like I'm like, yeah. So any opportunity that I can get. But I was thinking about it too, as you were saying that it's no different than when they're younger. It's just as they've gotten older. And this was what Mike was saying that was so wise. Like, okay, jujitsu, like I can actually enjoy that. I think the challenge for some of us as fathers when the kids are younger is trying to get into their world with things that we don't necessarily love or enjoy. That's like even more challenging. Jiu-jitsu, sure. Listening to my daughter, her 14th fake dance recital, like that was challenging for me.
Yeah. We absolutely agree with that 100%. It's challenging just in different ways. Kids challenge us constantly. It's just how they're challenging us, what they're teaching us. They're born our teachers, but they evolve and we shift. But if we can stay in that very humble space of being learners in front of our kids is great. Tell me more about the transition, Mike, that you're in right now. Like, what does that look like? Because here you are, dude, it's always so great, by the way, when you've maybe solved the money problem and people would look at your life and they're like, fuck, Mike, you have it all. Like you've got it all. You've got this incredible relationship with your wife, your coaching, you've made it, quote unquote, financially and all these things. But yet you're in this transition still. You still are in this place of growth. Talk to me more about what that looks like presently.
I think it's kind of that same thing, just the next version of who you are. Like my daughter's challenging me right now. I haven't bought a single family house since 2014. And my daughter comes to me yesterday and she said, she's the 18-year-old and she's just trying to figure out what she wants to do. And we've always like looked at their, what are they interested in and how do we align around them and just try to really do that versus like, hey, this is what we think you should do. And honestly, none of my kids, I don't think she's going to go to college, and which means that none of my kids will have gone to college. She came to me yesterday and she said, Dad, I want to buy an Airbnb. And I'm like, okay. She said, how do I do that? And I was like, I'm having to really come back to like, yeah, how do you do that? Like, how do you go buy a single family investment property? And it sounds crazy, but it's really challenging me to think in different terms and that's just one version. One thing that Karen and I have been talking about too, when you start thinking about money and success, Ken McElroy, who's been a mentor of mine for a while, he said something that has always stuck with me. He buys assets everywhere. And we're always talking about how, your second homes, your vacation homes, et cetera, are not necessarily an asset. But he's got like a ranch and he had this house in Coeur d'Alene and he had a house in Sedona. And he said, I keep these places because as my kids are getting older, I want to have a place that as they grew up, they loved it. And as long as they keep coming back, I'm going to keep it. It might not be an asset, but it's a place where the family can come. And so Karen and I have been thinking about different versions of that. We've been talking recently about, we used to save for vacations. That was one of the things that it was kind of like a 7-7-7 thing. Every 7 days, we're kind of having some family time. Every 7 weeks is a mini vacation. Every 7 months, we would take a big vacation. And like I said, our kids have seen the world. But what we're talking about now is like, and I don't want to rush them, but also like we could be needing to pay for vacation for 15 people or 25 people, because in order for us to keep the family together while they're going through this transition, like I might have to pay. Kara's parents paid for all of us to go on a cruise to Italy like 18 years ago or something. I want to do that. So we're just thinking about, we're obviously from an asset and legacy side. And I have some dreams and visions that I'm kind of thinking of differently around that too. But even just about even the expenses and the experiences and compounding that. And as the kids start having spouses and grandchildren, and like, how do we make sure that we've got enough income and I guess just wealth to be able to continue to have those experiences?
Yeah. Here's a question, not where I wanted to go today, but rarely do these conversations ever end up exactly where I want them to go initially. But it's like, talk to me about spoiling kids or growing up in wealth. This came up yesterday in a conversation with another front row dad of having access to so much. In fact, Qasim, who we interviewed on the podcast, that show may be dropping before this one. He brought this up because here's a guy who ultimately he didn't have much and he solved a lot of those challenges that he faced perhaps for his kids, but maybe created some new ones along the way. I'm curious, especially with your children being older, now adults, what are your thoughts on maybe as you look back, growing up with wealth and even how you're viewing that right now? And you talk about taking your kids and maybe their grandkids on these trips, still relevant of the abundance that somebody like you has in their life. Walk me through some of your thinking around that. Could it be too much? Is there dangers with that? Do you try to control the outcome of that abundance?
This has been an ongoing conversation with Kara and I for quite a while. And Kara and I had a cognizant, like an actual conversation around this where I said, you know what, I need to stop saying something. Up until probably 8 months ago, maybe a year ago, I would say, we'd have a conversation like this. And I would say, well, here's what Kara and I did. And the jury's still out because I hadn't seen the full version of it yet. And so I said to myself 8 or 12 months ago when I was having a conversation with Kara after, saying this at dinner or something with some friends, I said, I'm going to stop saying that because the jury's no longer out. And I'm biased, obviously, but my kids are not, they don't expect the world to give them anything. I feel like they're good humans. I feel like there's so many things, even having the conversation with the McCarthys and being part of Front Row Dads and really designing the value conversation and that whole process. I've often found myself saying, I wished that I had Front Row Dads 15 years ago. But Mike actually said this again in a different conversation. He said, well, you did a version of it even without all of that. Our kids have accepted and adopted our values. And so to really directly answer your question, Kara and I actually would not let our kids get a job. And I think a lot of this is probably not going to be popular. And I hesitate to even share this, like just from a macro perspective sometimes, because you got to like really weigh everything with family dynamics and the humans and who they are and everything else. But Kara and I would not let our kids get a job because I've worked really, really hard for my freedom. And there was no way that Taco Time or some other company or place was going to tell me that I couldn't, I know this sounds crazy, but that I couldn't take a vacation, or also that my kids couldn't come because they couldn't get the time off work. And so my kids always, they did work for us and they would, do some other things here and there, but we actually would not let our kids get a regular job until they were 18. And I know that's probably not like popular, but I worked really hard for my freedom.
Dude, that's exactly the type of conversation that we want to be having here, because this isn't about saying shit that everybody's going to agree with. This is about the real story, what really happens in your home, and then let people learn from that. They can agree with you or not. But what I hear is that you were clear on your values, and that was ultimately helping determine what decisions you make. And what I really just heard was you want freedom. You want to be able to travel with your family, and you didn't want anything standing in the way of that. You're not saying, I don't want my kids to learn how to get along with other people. I don't want to learn my kids to learn how to work. I don't want to learn how, like, it's not like that. My kids are above, making a taco. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing an alignment of values that then creates an outcome, which is awesome. That's what I hope everybody does. And if their values differ, then their outcomes will likely follow suit.
Yeah. And, I think I forgot who said this, but years ago I was involved in a church and the pastor always said, if you tell me, I will forget. If you show me, I may remember. If you involve me, I'll understand. And this is kind of like that cliche, people, it's not words. Like you don't tell people, you show them. And that's one thing that I think is, exactly what you're saying. Like our kids were always involved in the conversations. We didn't separate. And I've seen that with so many amazing people in the Front Row Dads communities too. Our kids were always at dinner. They were always having the conversations with us. Kara and I there wasn't a whole lot of conversations that we wouldn't have openly with our family, unless it was like, I've gone through some really challenging times in business. Everybody wants to talk about the good stuff, but we've had some really challenging times. And even in that, like COVID was a great example. When COVID happened, like we weren't hiding the challenges that we were having in business and putting our head in the sand or like separating. They were older at this point too, but we kind of hit that head on. And the more they can hear the challenges and the struggles and be part of just life, they learn through seeing that. And here's a quick story, just even on Tim, my middle son. He didn't go to college, but he went to like a trade school. He wanted to go learn audio engineering. And on the point of like always, figuring out what they're excited about, he started one Christmas, I think he was like 15 or 16. He came and he said, "Hey, I want a MIDI keyboard." And he's like, "I really want to start cutting tracks with my homies," he said. And so we got him this MIDI keyboard, and then he comes in, he starts showing us music and everything else. Well, Karen and I had a really good friend that had a recording studio in his house. And I just passively asked him one day, I'm like, "Hey, do you ever do any like mentoring? Happy to pay you." And he's like, "Yeah, send him over." So this guy taught Tim for like 2 years, and I kept trying to pay him and he would never let me pay him. And so Tim learned like all this. And so anyway, he went to audio engineering school. Well, he wanted to. And so we went and did the tour. We go through the whole tour. He's loving it. You can see his eyes lighten up. And then we get into the end of the tour was the finance department. And so we go into this classroom and the lady comes in and she's like, "You can get student loans and there's all these ways that you can finance it and everything else." And I kind of saw his demeanor change at that point in time. And so when we left, I was like, "What do you think?" And he's like, "I really love the school. I'd love to do this." I'm like, "Well, what's wrong?" And he's like, "I don't really want to go into student debt." He's like, "Everything I've heard you guys talk about." And he's like, "I just don't really know how I feel about going into debt to do this." And I'm like, "Tim, like if this is really what you want to do, we're going to help you." But that's just one point of like, my kids don't expect, they're constantly coming to us. Like, number one, they don't expect it. But number two, just like my daughter or Dylan or even Tim, they're coming to us asking questions like, "Dad, how do I do this? How do I get this done?" And it's by learning.
Fellas, I want to take a minute and share something personal with you. A few years ago, at the high point of my professional career, I felt like I was really struggling at home. And I knew I could be doing so much better in my marriage and as a father to my 2 boys. So I invited 30 guys to get together and talk about how we could win at home. And today, the Brotherhood has grown and it consists of 200 guys from 10 different countries. And recently, we decided to define our core values. What made this community so unique? Why was it growing so quickly and with such great guys? And how do we want to show up for each other going forward? What type of people would we want to have join us? And this is what we came up with. Our core value number 1 is what we call 5 whys. And this is about authentic curiosity. And here's what it reads. We are humble, lifelong learners searching for level 10 success within each of our 6 pillars. We ask big questions and we're vulnerable when big questions are asked of us. No bullshit, no posturing, just a deep willingness to be better. We are grounded in our mission to be family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. We are hungry for wisdom that allows us to connect more deeply. We are conscious of our egos and choose to rise above them. Suspending judgment, we want to see things from a new perspective, aware of our blind spots, facing fears. We see failure as feedback. We choose growth. Value number 2, we call this one lead domino. This is about intentional execution. We take massive action. We believe in deliberate participation with full presence. We show up, step up, and speak up. Our calendars reflect our priorities, making time for what matters most. Decisive, focused. We are conscious and calculated. We make moves that are efficient and effective, creating with confidence, intentional routines and rhythms. We believe in building momentum through healthy habits. Aware of our core values, we apply our true strengths and stay in our zone of genius. We are men of our word. We honor our commitments, no excuses, no time to waste, all in engagement now. And finally, number 3, we call this one rising tide. This is about communal drive. We believe in the power of unified and aligned strengths, creative cooperation and collaboration, team effort. We honor our ethos of engagement to build true connections, respect, trust. We believe in diverse opinions and inclusive conversations, freely sharing our best resources, helping each other win. We are the source. We believe in community challenges that drive healthy competition, legacy and 7G impact, band of brothers. Everyone gives more than they take. We prop each other up through unconditional generosity. Together, we go further, faster. Now listen, guys, if those values resonate with you and you're considering joining the Brotherhood, here's what one of our members has to say about their experience.
I just wanted to say that one of the reasons that I'm part of Front Row Dads is that just knowing that I'm part of this group helps me holding myself to a higher standard. I started out today saying that I wanted to get involved and outside my comfort zone, even though the language barrier. And I wanted to just thank all of you for being a safe place to be outside the comfort zone. And also, especially to Josh for holding me accountable when we were on the team now. And one from the team was supposed to share what we've been talking about. He just pointed at me and said, you asked for it. So this one's on you. And I like the fact that I'm being held accountable and being held to a higher standard. That's why I'm here.
Look, man, the time is now to pour into your family. No matter how great you are at fatherhood, marriage, or juggling your work and your personal life calendar, we can help you be better. And if you're ready to take the next step, go to frontrowdads.com and click Join the Brotherhood. How do you think you create that? Because I can imagine that somebody's going, all right, my kids are really young. How do I create an environment, Mike, where my kids aren't entitled? Other people are listening to this going, damn, Mike, my kids are totally entitled. Would absolutely expect. What do I do to correct this? Like, any thoughts around that?
Karen, I said this actually at a Front Row Dads event. Somebody was asking about, they were struggling with some challenges with their wives. And by the way, this is what I love about Front Row Dads. It's a dad's organization, but I come away like so much closer to my wife every time I've ever been in the group. But somebody was having some struggles with their wife and they're like, well, how do you navigate this? And I'm like, I feel like I'm so fortunate because my wife is like so easy. And that wasn't the question. But when I think about my kids too, I have to be my kids have been so easy. Like when people start talking about the teenage years and
all of a sudden we see listenership drop off right now. Why did the statistic about 20 minutes into the show just tank? I can't relate to Mike anymore. Yeah. No, go ahead, man. I have thoughts on this. I have theories about why, but go ahead.
When people start talking about we're approaching the teenage years and, my sons were fine, but my daughter's almost a teen. I could literally count on one hand the amount of not even major issues we've had with our kids, like issues. And so if I go way back, like from the time Dylan was born, we treated him as a human. And I already kind of said this, but we just brought them into our world. And, I think I've done growing up with the dad that I did or didn't have, I think I had a really negative, bad version. I had a horrible childhood, but I didn't really look at it that way. I didn't know what I didn't have, but it gave me a really great example of what I didn't want. And I don't care whether it's employees. I don't care whether it's your spouse. I don't care whether it's your children. Like people just want to be treated the way that you would want to be treated. Like if you just think about it. And so from the time Dylan was born, from the time our kids were little, we tried really hard to just include them in the conversation, treat them as a human. If there's one thing that I've found myself sharing with people more than anything, Karen and I had kids really early. And then I see people like Kara's sister, who's an amazing human. She had kids later in life and she just would get really frustrated. And I just, she'd be like, Mike, I'm so frustrated. Like, what would you do here? And I was like, hey, we just got to think about this. Like that little human right there is having emotional struggles. Like he's an actual person and he doesn't even know how he's acting. And it's on us, half the time to really just step back and I'm not going to engage in that. Like they're just little.
Mike, I got to ask a question. Did you ever lose your shit? Like would anybody have ever described you as like lacking serious emotional intelligence, flying off the handle, losing your cool on the regular basis? Like I imagine, like when I talk with you, I'm like, gosh, it'd be so great growing up with Mike as my dad. Dad, by the way, I love you if you're listening to this, but it's like, just because you seem so easygoing, you seem so chill, you seem, all right. Is that who you were most of the time? Was that the culture in your house?
No. Well, in my house growing up or my house?
No. I'm sorry. For you, like you as a dad, your home, you, the leader, like were you emotionally stable 99% of the time type of thing? That's what I'm imagining, but
96% of the time.
See, that's amazing to me.
But okay, in fairness, let's go back a little bit because Kara and I, like even in high school, so we dated in high school and we would talk till 2 or 3 in the morning and we were always having visions. Like we were always talking about the future, a better life, a better self, a better home, we spend so much time vision on our businesses, right? Like what do we want our businesses to look like? And what do we want our employees to look like? And Karen and I spent a lot of time just really visioning our life, even again from high school. And so I think there's a portion of that if we put as much time and energy into visioning what an amazing home looked like. And that being said, yes, I lost my shit sometimes. But Karen and I have talked about this for a while. I've always visualized like these things in life as like bumpers in a bowling alley. when the kids are little and they'd want to put the bumpers up, I'd get pissed. But really our job is to kind of keep the kids out of the gutter. But also there's some of those things in life that were kind of bumpers for me. And I had a couple of experiences where we started a business at 24. It quickly grew to over 100 employees. Like, it was insane. I was holding on for dear life. Every chance I got, I was just scratching for mentors. And I used to call it stacking bodies, which isn't a great version. I wouldn't say that today, but I was growing so fast. I was just hiring people and I would lose my shit at work. I would come home stressed out. And there's a couple points in time. There was one time where a gold mining company that owed us like $450,000, and we had them on a 1-week pay period because we knew they were struggling. They owed us like $450,000 and they went bankrupt. They put a lock on the gate and they're like, we don't know when you're going to pay you. And I had already paid my guys. And so I went through this, like, I've had some really challenging times. And I remember, this is why I'm saying this. I remember how I was, by the way, this was going into 2008 too, which that brought its own problems.
Sure.
But I remember I was stressed out, and Kara, I'll never forget this. She grabbed me one day and she said, you're not yourself. You're snapping at the kids. Like, you're coming home late, all this. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Like, I could literally lose everything. Like, we could lose our house. I could lose the business. I had just had to lay off 35 employees at like right before Christmas time. I'm like, I could lose everything. And she looked at me and she's like, what are they going to do? Take our kids? And I was like, right. What are they going to do? Take the kids? Like, that, what really matters? Like, and so, yeah, I've lost my shit. I've lost my shit on the kids when they were younger. There was nothing like looking in the eyes though. And it didn't take me long. And I think it's probably because of my childhood and my dad and everything. When I would see that, like, any level of fear in my kids or disappointment in their eyes, whether they disappointed me or they were disappointed at me, I think that's probably part of what would snap me out of that pretty quick. Because I think I never wanted to be that guy to my kids.
We talked about this morning during our band meetup with Hal, Tim, and Justin, and I was sharing that I'm always amazed. I'm constantly amazed at how all the things you learn, say this as a father, you don't know how to do that yet. You learn all these little hacks about things you can say, things you can do, ways to manage your calendar. Like, there's a shit ton of things we can learn as fathers, right? But the one thing that makes a difference in my home, and then immediately my wife and my kids, more than anything, is emotionally how I show up. Like this morning, things were getting a little heated. I could tell that people were starting to get angry with each other. And I cracked a little joke and kept it cool, kept it light. And then immediately I could feel all the tension in the air go out of the room. And I'm like, that's my real power, is actually managing my own emotional state, and then therefore helping the feeling of our house to be a feeling where they can be safe, where they can be cool. I noticed that I watch my son sometimes react to something. He's like, oh, what if I do this, if I do that? He's kind of panicking and freaking out. And I'm like, that's me. He's literally doing me. Like, that's how I act when I'm out of control, when I don't feel safe, when I feel like everything's about to fall apart. Like, he is mirroring my vibe. And so learning to create a vibe. So, and the way I relate this all back to you, Mike, is I think of like when your kids are easy, a lot of times it's because you bring a feeling of ease into your home, and that's the energy that you're creating is one where people resonate with you. You start to elevate your vibe, they start to elevate their vibe. You start raise your voice, they raise their voice. Like, you are, in many ways, like I've heard it said, you're either a thermostat or a thermometer. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Thermostat or the thermometer. And like, I want to be the thermostat.
Yes. I love it. And I so relate to it. And even as you're saying that, starting that business at 24 and looking at, when you were talking about losing my cool, I was a terror but I snapped out of it really quick. I mean, again, that many employees, hiring coaches, consultants, doing the deep work on me, that whole thermostat versus thermometer, like, yes, it just happened really fast for me at a young age. I remember actually one of my greatest employees, his name was Daniel, and we still talk today. He said, you're going to calm down in your older age. And actually, like, I was a terror, man. But I quickly realized that, like, this version of me is, and it goes back to what I was saying with the kids too, and their emotions and everything else, whether it's employees, whether it's clients, whether it's your children, whether it's your wife. Like, I can't lose my shit because of, the way somebody else is acting, or because even expectations. This is a huge part of, like, again, employees, husbands, wives, kids, whatever it is. My expectations on somebody else there's no bearing on that. Like, I can't expect somebody to do things the way that I would do it. I either have to teach that or show it. And that, I think that's the big thing with our kids is, Kara and I just trying to model that. And when you were talking about like the way that you handled that this morning, and I think kind of the same. I used to be kind of a terror, but it's funny because the kids have even talked about this now. Like I've calmed down a ton, and the kids love Kara. Like, I mean, they call her every day, they text her every day. And even coming out of a Front Row Dads event, I was like, man, if I just talk, I have to text my kids. Like, so they love her, but also she was kind of like when Kara says jump, like people jump. And so I shifted at an early age and just calmed down a lot. And it wasn't, I think fortunately, I actually think that the business and a bunch of employees taught me that. And so my kids probably didn't have to learn it the hard way from me.
Yeah. This is awesome, by the way. Not where I saw the first part of this conversation going, but I'm so glad that it did, because this is so valuable. And I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this, Mike, at a very deep level, what we've just spoken about, because these are things people care about, especially the entitlement versus easy, that conversation. And I think energetically, like the first part of this conversation has a lot to do with energy, and the seasons of life are a lot about energy and the shifting of energy and focus and attention, both adapting to our environment, but then also the tools that we bring to each of those environments. Really cool first part of the conversation. What I want to do is pause right here, Mike, and I want to come back for a second part of the conversation. And I'm excited to dig into defining freedom, how you see that, also building teams that buy your freedom. I want to talk to you about how you've done that. And I largely want to talk to you about it because that's exactly where I am right now. So I want to have a conversation, get ready to do a little coaching with me. But guys, if you enjoyed this first part of the podcast interview, please share this with somebody that would enjoy this conversation around easy kids, entitled kids, the energy around all this. Such fascinating stuff. Why you won't let your kids have a job until they're 18, handling abundance with kids, seasons of life. It was all there. All right, Mike, we're going to pause here and come back for part 2. If you're listening to the show, part 2 will drop in a couple of days. And that's it. Guys, thanks for listening. We'll be back with Mike for another round 2 of Building Teams, Buying Freedom. Gentlemen, thanks for listening to the show today. 2 actions to take from here. First, implement one thing that you learned from the interview. And number 2, share this episode with somebody who values being a family man with a business. If you're enjoying the Front Row Dad podcast, the biggest thanks we ever get are honest reviews. So thank you for your feedback in advance. We read all of them. And if you want to learn more about the Brotherhood, which is our private community of 200 men from 6 different countries, visit frontrowdads.com for more info. If you're wondering what the hell the Brotherhood is all about, I'll leave you with some real feedback from guys who are active members and why they are part of our crew. Thanks again for listening to the show, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
You have this passion for wanting to find a way to make you a better parent and a better husband, just better in general. And so you develop this community of like-minded men that aspire to be better and aspire to put family first and business second. And so to me, there's no greater place I'd rather be. People ask me all the time, like, if I could only pick one group, mastermind, organization, whatever to be part of besides my own, it's always yours. And that's it. And by the way, part of that has to do with you and the leader you are and the way that you treat people and how you show up and the level of preparation that you have and the quality and amount of value that you offer. And then part of it's in the community that's been assembled and these unbelievable like-minded men that show up willing and ready to serve and to give and to share. And so to me, there's no better place that I can be spending my time. I look at 2 different things that we can be doing with our time. One of them is growing relationships and starting first with the most important relationships. And the other one is growing our financial acumen and our wealth to be able to do the things that we want to do and have impact and be able to spend time with the people that we value most by buying that time back. So to me, what you do and what I do is a great marriage of what I think is most important. And I would also throw in there that health is, the other component of that. And I feel like the community that you've built, that each of us have built, is also centered around that. Because you talk about being a great husband, parent, that's going to come from taking care of yourself and making sure that you have the energy to be able to serve. And I do the same thing on a wealth standpoint, because wealth to me is not just about money. It's actually about having the time and the space to have your personal health. I would take having great health over no money any day of the week. rather than the inverse of that, having a lot of money but no health. So to me, those are like the three most important components. And to me, we're always merging those three in the things that we each do. And so I think that's why there's a lot of crossover of, members. That's why what you do resonates so much with me. What I do resonates so much with you. I joined as a lifetime member for that small little window where you offered it. I'm like, I'm in, because I know if I'm going to commit my time anywhere, this is it, because it makes me a better man, makes me a better husband, makes me a better father. It encourages me to really step up my peer group with other like-minded men so that I can be on mission, on point with other people that will hold me accountable at the highest level.
John and I met a year and a half ago with the launch of my first book. And as we were going through the interview, I began to ask him questions about the brotherhood, and it resonated within me that a community of like-minded, like-hearted men that wanted to win, as he was just saying, at business and in life. And I'd reverse that. I want to win as a dad, and then I'd also love to be successful in business, because I feel like if I don't get the dad right, who cares what I did in business? That's my legacy. That's what lives beyond me. So to tribe up with a bunch of dudes going in the same direction with the pillars that are in place and the way that not only are you encouraged, compelled, you're chided, you're laughed with, but you get to pace yourself, but you can get around a band of dudes that you can trust, you can share with, you can grow with. And just recently completed a time with these guys. We did this fast at the start of the new year. Every day I would tune in to the little app where we were sharing comments, and I was so impressed how you could see guys that were further down the road and things like this, guys that were just starting, and the camaraderie, the encouragement. So for myself, this was a total fit, and I would encourage any dude that's looking for a place where you can feel connected with a band of guys wanting to go in the same direction. Front Row Dads is for you.